Now,
Living in a great big way.
one more, boy.
Living in a great big way. Louis.
Hello and welcome to my studio. My name is Mary and I'm the artist behind Marydean Draws, and I create accessible and fun art tutorials for you to try. I have been going through a whole series about getting started with watercolor, starting with the very basics. I started with a video about basic supplies, and I've taken you through mixing colors, getting the right consistency. So if you haven't seen any of those videos, I definitely encourage you to go back and start from the very beginning, try those things out and build your skills to where we are today. If you want to, you can jump in today too. You can start anytime. Today, I'm going to teach you 3 ways that you can create texture with watercolor. I'm really excited. We're doing a little squirrel project. I love squirrels. Here's my little sketch. I'm going to take you step by step through these 3 ways that you can create texture. You can actually combine any of these ways, and you actually might have some ways to create texture that I don't tell you. So just let me know in the comments the ways that you like to create texture and the ways you take what I teach you and incorporate it in your own art. So let's get started. Here's a quick rundown of the materials that you can gather today. If you want, you can just work with a sketchbook. If you'd like, and you have a printer, you can print the template for today that I'm going to be working on some watercolor paper. These are available on my Substack account. If you sign up, and for $5 a month, you can get access to all the printables, and you can print these for yourself. It's got a little drawing guide and a little squirrel example. I also have this guide to sketching a squirrel that are also in today's download pack, along with inspiration from art history. So you can download all that on Substack. In addition, grab whatever watercolor paints you have. Today I grabbed my big palette of liquid tube paints that I have put on this palette. I've been using the same palette for a really long time, and I mix in the middle. You don't have to have something like this. Grab what you have. We'll make it work. Grab something for mixing colors, some water. Also today, grab a pencil. I have a couple varieties of pencils that I'm going to show you, but a regular old pencil will do just fine. Also, grab a couple brushes. For this tutorial, you are going to want to have a rather thin, small brush. You can use one like this that has a nice pointy tip, or you can use a teeny tiny one. Just the smaller you get, the more detail you'll be able to produce. But if you have one just like this, it'll work just fine. We can make it work. Also for this tutorial, if you have a white crayon, that's going to be great. And also I'm going to show you a couple things that you could do with chalk. Also, another alternative is to grab some colored pencils. Those will work really nicely too with watercolor. I love mixing mediums. I do it all the time, and I'm going to show you a couple ways to do that today. So grab your watercolor paper, your paint, your brushes, and your other supplies, and let's get started. I wanted to start off today by showing you this adorable watercolor painting by Albrecht Dürer. It was done in 1492, if you can believe it. The details in it are so cute. I wanted you to see some ways that he created texture of the squirrel. You can see there's some highlights in white. He's got all kinds of colors in this squirrel. There's a lot of yellow. There's gray. We've got areas of brown. We've got areas of darker value in here. He's got cute little whiskers, and he has that little accent, white accent on his eye where the light hits his eye. He's got little eyelashes even, and the cutest little ears. And look at his little fingers. I don't know. This is squirrels. Do you call them fingers and toes? Paws? Funny little paws. It's funny, you wonder how squirrels have changed, or if they're about the same since 1492. So I wanted you to see this as kind of the inspiration picture for what we're going to work on today. And we're going to use the squirrel as the way that we're practicing texture today. And I just want you to see this is how he signed his work. He had an A and a D, and I just love that. So you can look for that in any of his artwork. I thought it might be helpful to show you a really easy way to mix brown. So I'm going to show you 2 ways that you could mix brown. I always like to start with an orange. The first way that you can make it is you can start by adding the tiniest bit of black. I actually don't have black on this palette, so I'm adding a really dark blue, and it works. If you get it too dark, then just add orange back in until you get a brown color that you like. You can also add some yellow in if you need it. You could add some red if you want to get a more reddish brown. The second way would be to go opposite on the color wheel, which would be to mix in blue, which I actually already did. I'm going to use this blue this time. Let's see what happens there. Yeah, we get kind of a muddy brown. If it gets too muddy and gross, you can warm it up with the orange until you get brown. You could also start with a brown if you have a brown on your palette, but that's just an easy way to mix a little bit more interesting browns. I think I'm going to go with this one for my squirrel. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in this base layer of my squirrel so I can build on the texture. I'm just going to do kind of a quick wash. I think that the little nut in his hand, I'm going to do a darker brown later on. And his tail is interesting. His tail is actually, you look at the photo, this is printed in black and white, but it's got a lot of gray in it. I'm going to start with brown and then maybe build some other colors in later. I'm washing out the color. Don't want to start too dark. I want to be able to see that texture. And I'm going to drop a little bit of gray in there. And I'm also going to drop some yellow. A little yellow mixed with the brown. I don't want it too bright, but the squirrel in the photo has quite a bit of yellow in it. Just dropping that color in while it's wet. I'm going to go ahead and do this guy, and then we'll come back and we'll do experiment number 1. So you can pause the video, take your time, and fill in these 2 with the browns that you want to do. If you want, you could make him a black squirrel. You could make him, we have black squirrels here in Virginia. You can make him more red if you wanted. If you wanted to use a brown that has more red in it, up to you. So go ahead and you can pause the video until you're all ready. And your layer, you want your layer to be dry before we come back and work on the texture. So just go ahead and pause the video, or if you have a hair dryer you want to use to kind of dry up your layer, you can do that as well. I'll probably use my dryer that I have, my drying tool. Okay, I've got my layers all dry. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with some different colors and I'm going to add texture, but I want my brush to be pretty dry so that I can get nice thin brush strokes. And I'm going to start with the brown that I had already, and slowly I'll probably darken it and maybe add some lighter tones too. Because if you notice in that picture of that squirrel, his texture is not all one color. So if you want to make it interesting, think about adding different colors. And I'm just taking this little brush and just adding lines. And I'm kind of referencing the photo here to see the way that his hair goes. His hair is all crazy. And kind of looking, I know it's hard to see in this black and white photo here. You might want to pull up a photo of a squirrel to really see the direction in which his hairs are going. This guy has kind of crazy hair, so it's going in all directions. And depending on kind of how realistic you want to make it. And some of the hairs on his body are going to be really short, and then others, like especially around his tail, are going to be longer. So you can kind of think about that as well. And they're very irregular, so you want to kind of have them shooting out in all directions. He's got a little darker spot on his nose here and in his ear, so I'm just going to add those while I am. And the buildup of this texture is also going to add some areas of value and show where the shadows are falling. And let's go ahead and darken up our brown. Then you can add black, or you can add like a dark blue like I did there. Adding, and as these dry, they won't be as dark as they are right now. They're wet, they'll kind of dry darker, so just keep that in mind. And I think the center of his tail is actually darker. Let's experiment with a little bit more yellow layers. Now this kind of same technique would work really well for grass. You're trying to create like a field. You might alternate with a variety of greens to get a really interesting field. You might use this get different leaves. Let's go maybe one shade darker. You can start light and eventually if you build and you're combining a lot of wet layers, eventually they're going to start to blend, so you may want to take a break at some point. You can kind of see that happening with mine, and go ahead and let it dry before you keep building, because eventually like the layers as they'll blend together, and it's probably going to look best if you've got that more dry strokey effect. So probably you're going to want to start with a lighter color and go darker and keep building until you're happy with kind of the depth of color that you got. You always want to go back and get the black of the eye really will finish it off. I'm going to pause and grab my black paint. And for the eye, you just want to make sure it's really thick so that you can put on an even layer. Really thick and really dry. I'm going to fill in his eye. He's so cute. So you can continue to build. You might even want to try a more orangey layer. Like a brown that leans orange. So all that's going to just add a lot of interest. I'll come back later and do his little acorn. Okay, so that's our first experiment. So the first experiment, this is what it kind of looks like, dry brush. Probably if I was going to keep going, I would keep going with an even darker layer like this. Again, I need to wait until this is dry, but I kind of just want to show you. Yeah, I wouldn't use the black layer until the very end, where you can go in and see those areas where you want it to be darkest. I would leave that till the very end. Black is kind of, if I use black, it's usually like the very last color that I use to kind of punch it up. And create that darkest layer. And even then, I usually don't use like a pure black. I would mix it with something, with brown. Okay, we're gonna pause there on that guy and we're gonna try this guy. Okay, now this time we're going to build on our watercolor layer with some pencil. And the fun thing about pencil is that you can put down a layer of pencil and then watercolor on top. You can start with pencil, then watercolor, then do more pencil, then watercolor on top. You can really do a lot of fun things with pencil. I love adding pencil at the end, just to get the details that are harder for me to do with watercolor. These are a couple of really nice pencils, Tombow pencils. I like the higher number ones, like the 6B or the 4B, because they have really thick, chunky lead, and I think they give some really nice lines. So, but you can use a regular pencil too. I'll start with this regular pencil, and then I'll come in and add. Obviously, I just started with a really matte layer of color here, I would probably come back in and add some different tones. I'd add some yellows and add some different browns to give him some different interesting, but I just wanted to show you what you can do with just pencil. And you can go in. I forgot to add little whiskers for this guy. Don't forget that the white of his belly also has some texture to it. And I'm kind of, the pencil, I'm kind of trying to go, I don't want to go straight up and down because the texture goes along with the direction of his body. So I'm using the pencil to kind of accentuate the shapes that we already have here. You don't want to do, real angular pencil. You want them to go along with the curves of the guy's body. Isn't that cute? And then you could come in, you could do any combination of these. You could come in with your watercolor. You could just add, areas, darker color, yellow, like that. Oh, I love that effect. You could also, here, I'm going to show you what it looks like with this chunkier pencil. Do you see how much darker those lines get? Oh, I just love this pencil. And I love this pencil especially. Sometimes I won't even use watercolor for the eye because it can be so precarious, to get that little detail. So sometimes I'll use a pencil like this instead of watercolor. So you see him just kind of modeling and shaping his little body here with this pencil. You do have to be aware this will smudge. So you'd want to set it with like some fixative or like a hairspray because it'll smudge if you touch it. All right. So I know that's not watercolor. I know that's pencil, but it's the way I am always trying to figure out how to combine watercolor with other mediums. Okay, so there's adding texture with pencil. Again, you could combine these two options and really beautiful effects. Of course, you could use ink. Ink's just not one that I use very often. Okay, last option that you can try. Another way is to start and actually do the texture even before you paint with something like this crayon. So this is a nice sharp crayon, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do texture just like I did with the pencil around the body, and areas that I know I want to be a lot whiter, I'm going to do thicker. So and I know it's kind of hard to see, so you kind of have to just guess what you're doing. Or if you can kind of angle your paper so you can see it. I see a lot of white on the outside of his tail, so I'm going to just really kind of fill in there. And I see a lot of white around here, top of his ear. I'm going to show you what this looks like. I've mixed up brown here already. And we're going to see what this does. So our waxy crayons are gonna resist the watercolor in the areas where I put it down. And it's gonna, it's gonna look a little funny while it's wet, but I think it's gonna be an interesting effect once it dries. I'm gonna add some bits of orange in here. I'm gonna go a little little bolder with the color here. Added some orange. Let's do some yellow on this guy's tail. I'm gonna dry this up and then show you what it looks like. Here's what he looks like all dried up. You could also come in and experiment with crayon on top of your layer. Another option is here are a couple, these are chalks, and you could experiment. You don't want to do this when your watercolor is wet, but when it's dry, you could experiment with using chalk for the texture. Isn't that fun? You could use some white for the highlights. I don't think this looks great with the wax effect, but I think it could look really cute in combination with the pencil here. So the pencil gets the darker, and then your chalk can come in and get the highlights. Yeah, I really like that effect actually, because it allows you a way to lighten up some of the areas that you couldn't do with watercolor. All right, so that's the chalk. I like that. You could play with, pulling in different colors, some more red tones, some more brown. I think you would just have to watch and not overdo it, because you want to preserve the beauty of the watercolor underneath and not overdo these other elements that you're bringing in. So that's always my struggle whenever I bring in other materials. Well, I loved painting that little baby squirrel with you. I think he's so cute. I need to fill in his little acorn that he's eating. I really I think my favorite experiments are probably these two. I always love a pencil outline on watercolor, but there's something about just pure watercolor that's really sweet and simple too. So it kind of depends on what I'm creating of which one I'd go for. But for an animal, I just really love, often when I'm painting birds, I did a whole bird series that has these really strong pencil outlines. I think pencil just gives such a great texture, so I really love pencil for animals. So this is probably my favorite, with the little highlights in there from the chalk pencil. I think really give it a warmth and a texture and a layered look that I really like. The wax was probably my least favorite. I think it could probably work better on a larger scale if you had a squirrel that was more the size of the whole page. I think because it was smaller here, then the pencil, the crayon is pretty chunky. So it kind of overpowers the size of the squirrel. So I would say this experiment would be my least favorite, but I think that it could work on a larger level, and maybe even in combination with the pencil, because you could put pencil over the wax crayon. And actually, when you do that, kind of digs into the wax and gives it a really neat effect. So I think that could work. Also, you could probably use the same thing with oil pastels. I love using oil pastels and pencil together. So I think all of those things, I hope that gives you some good information and kind of, sparks your imagination of what you could paint. So I want to know, like, what would you paint next? What animal? What bird? In my office here, I have a cute little guinea pig. Maybe I'll get him and show you, and you can provide some inspiration. I think a cat, a dog, all kinds. I love all kinds of animals, but I think that you could really create some fun things. So if you do any of that, drop me a picture and let me know. I'd love to see, and let me know what you learned from today's lesson. Thanks so much for joining me, and have a great day. Bye.